Welcome to FinovateEurope. I'm here today with Matt Hubert, Director of Lightbox Engineering at Credit Karma. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me about yourself. What do you do in your day-to-day job?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Credit Karma is all about championing financial progress for all. And what that means is helping people build credit, helping people get access to products and services that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get at great rates and things like that. So really helping people achieve their financial goals. And so what I do is I run a program called Lightbox, which is a way that we do that to really help provide certainty in products and lending and really help all of our members know exactly when they're going to try to get access to a product, they know exactly what they're going to get before they do it. So that's what I do.
I mean, that is what you do now, but you have an amazing track record of creating and scaling up startups. How do you do it?
Sure. So actually, yeah. So we joined Credit Karma actually through one of my previous startup, and for us, I think it's always been about customer value. It's always been about focusing on. It's the age-old thing, like building things people want, and it sounds trite, and it's on every blog post, it's in every article, it's what everyone will say to you, but it really is the truth of like you have to build things people want. And so I think that's something that I learned early on is really focusing on that customer experience, really focusing on that value, and trying to figure out, how can we build something that's a need to have, that is just so important that people can't live without it. Those types of products.
Yeah. And of course, if you had to do it all over again in today's landscape, what would you do differently?
I don't know if I would do a ton differently, and I think that speaks to that, the sort of the tools and the techniques are all the same. I think it's more just about doubling down on those core principles. So I think over the last 5-10 years, it's been very easy to start and scale startups, run companies, because access to capital has been so easy, right? It was so much capital, it was so easy to grow, and I think sometimes maybe that hyper growth allowed people to maybe make some mistakes and do things that they shouldn't have done. And now it's almost ironic that you hear VCs and you hear everyone talking about we need to focus on profitability, we need to focus profitability over growth. And I guess I've always been of the mindset of we should always be focusing on profitability. That should have been what we were doing from day one. And so I think today it's just a reminder, as always, that should be our focus.
Absolutely. But the trend today that there's an unprecedented amount of venture capital in fintech, but the trend sort of skews towards the companies that are already successful. Are the new startups, the very, very incumbent companies, missing out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, I don't know, I always like to think how we can be scrappier, and maybe that lack of capital can be used as an asset in certain cases. I think, in the absence of that capital, it requires you to really focus on that value, right? Because you don't have the privilege of that capital to grow. And I think actually some of the best startups are either bootstrapped or raised minimal amounts of capital. And so I think in that absence, it really helps you as a startup focus on what are those things that you should be doing, what are the ways that you can differentiate yourself in the market, and and how can you be scrappy and lean? Because here's the thing, it's easy to be successful when the money's flowing. Absolutely. It's hard to be successful when the money is scarce. And so I think now in these scarce times, I think the strongest will really survive. So I think it's a good thing.
Fair enough. And having the wealth of experience behind you, I'd like to finish on your favorite piece of advice that you've received in your career that you still adhere to today.
Yeah, great question. I think the number one thing that still sticks out to me that I practice today, every single day, is that sort of customer centricity. Speaking to customers, it doesn't matter how large you are, how small you are, if you're a major enterprise, if you're a two-person startup, like you should always know who your customers are, what they need, speak to them, go out, talk to them, run interviews, like really empathize with your customers. And I think that's something that I didn't know or do early on in my career. I didn't really get that. And it wasn't until people started to tell me that, and I heard that advice, and I saw it in action and started to do that, and it became a game changer. it really set the stage for how to build great products. And so, we do that every day at Credit Karma. It's a practice that I've even really tried to instill into my organization at Credit Karma, of the importance of that customer centricity. So that's advice that stuck with me, and I think it's made all the difference.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us, Matt.
Thanks for having me.